Hello and welcome to our final panel of the day. With me to discuss the growth and evolution of the role of advice in the later life market are Sandy Ameer-Beg, Principal, Acclaimed Mortgage Consultancy, Jane Benjamin, who's Director of Mortgages at Sesame Bankhall Group, Richard Merrett, Head of Strategic Development at SimplyBiz Mortgages, and Stuart Wilson, who's the CEO of Air Group. That's Answers in Retirement, of course. If you don't mind, panel, I'd like to kick off with a few questions which our delegates have been discussing in the chat rooms this morning. I'm keen to hear your thoughts. First question then. What do you believe are the major obstacles to mainstream mortgage advisors entering the later life advice arena, and how can they be overcome? I'd like to put that question first to Sandy, please.
Okay. So my thoughts are the confidence in the area of advice. Lots of people are worried about advising in equity release because of compliance issues, getting the appropriate PI cover, and just overall there's a fear of equity release. So they're just not confident in that area.
And I'd like to put that question as well to Jane, please. Jane, what do you think the major obstacles are?
Yeah, thanks, Paula. So I guess we've got a mix in sort of Sesame Network and PMS Mortgage Group. We've got quite a diverse set of advisors. I think the main thing that mainstream mortgage advisors need to be aware of are the opportunities in the later life arena, but also, you know, some of the things that are barriers are your historic misconceptions, and that sort of plays into the appetite for a normal mortgage advisor or advisor who doesn't specialise in later life to embrace the appetite. I guess with regards to lender panels, standard mortgage lending, extended max terms, RIO's an option, equity release. So there's lots of things that advisors can sort of look to do to sort of get in on this part of the market or understand a bit deeper. However, what I would say is, with regarding the misconceptions and appetite, referring to an expert is still a good option. So if you're a member or a broker and you're listening to this, you don't have to do it yourself if you don't want to. There's still a lot of great options for customers, you know, by referring it to a panel of your network or your club, or another broker in the industry who specialises in sort of later life. But as an industry as a whole, there's an array of support. So to just back that up, whether it be sort of exam qualification support, post-exam guidance, how to deal with your first case, which is often something that our advisors are worried about, marketing toolkits, technical knowledge, all that good stuff. So there's lots of help out there if advisors really want to grasp the opportunity, and support is available, and we'll all help you to get to that place should you want to do that.
Thank you, Jane. You mentioned the qualifications there, which leads on to our next question. Do you believe the current equity release qualifications are now fit for purpose, or do they need further development? And can I ask that question first to Stuart, please?
Yeah, thank you, Paula. The simple answer is no, they're not fit for purpose. And I guess the clue is in the question. We need to move to a more broad understanding and reflecting the FCA's report work that they did both in the Dear CEO letters last autumn, and also the thematic work they did in the summer. It's around holistic understanding, and I think there's already now a pendulum swing over towards this phraseology around later life lending. So if we look at that in regards to qualifications, we need to start moving in the sort of short, medium term towards appropriate qualification structures. And I think that, again, there's an importance to the word structure. So advisors have got clear pathways. What actually does it mean to delivery for customers? So later life lending is a subject, but I think then wrapped around that, we have to have actually a layer of qualifications specifically around later life advice. And I know one of the issues that members have been talking about online recently is around this piece around the holistic understanding and the jigsaw puzzle pieces that slot into later life lending advice. So awareness of care, awareness of estate planning, awareness of tax and benefits, all of those ancillary subjects need to be composite parts of a good exam structure qualification framework. So I think there's a lot of work to be done, and there is a lot of work being done by the council, by organisations like the LIBF, CII, etc. So good news is, great focus already starting to evolve, but in answer to your question, it's not there yet. And a siloed equity release qualification, I personally don't think is any longer fit for purpose unless it's a small part of a much bigger jigsaw.
Thank you, Stuart. Richard, can I ask your thoughts on the qualifications?
Thanks, Paula. I would have to agree with Stuart. So I think the qualification framework in its current format is often in conflict with what happens in the real world when engaging with clients and giving advice. There's far too great a focus on the past, products that are no longer sold, and as Stuart's already highlighted, absolutely not enough on the current and future needs. There needs to be a greater emphasis on the holistic piece, assessing vulnerability, long-term care, and IHT, as Stuart's just touched on. So I think they do need an overhaul, and what that will require is a coming together of the various different people that are involved in the market and sort of unifying of the different trade bodies that look at things.
Okay, away from the qualifications and onto, do you believe that soft skills are particularly important in advising later life consumers, maybe just as important as hard market knowledge, not to put words in your mouth? And can you teach soft skills? I'll put that question to Jane first, please.
Yeah, thanks, Paula. Definitely. And possibly more important, considering potential vulnerability of the customer group that these later life's targeted at. So I guess when we look at soft skills, what are they? It's just having a more personal conversation, but also recognizing how to understand what the customer is actually saying. So it's just about the conversation, what they say, the body language. And I think this is continued area of development for all. So not just in later life, any conversation that you're having with any customer, when you're talking from an advice perspective, or any walks of life that we deal with, both in personal and work. So how would you adapt your conversation towards each specific customer, I think is important. Everybody's different, everybody's an individual, and the needs are different. So expertise, technical knowledge is the core, but actually both are essential, and that's really comes down to the value of advice, you know, in our sector. From a compliance perspective, on a wider vulnerable customer point, advisors are great at empathising and adapting according to different customer circumstances. They're really good at that, and they do it naturally. But from what we see, more probably need to be done to evidence it, so MI, whatever that may be, to help to demonstrate from a regulation point perspective that advisors are actually taking the needs of vulnerable customers into account. So I think there's lots more we need to do, but the base is there, and it's a mix of both your hard and soft skills.
Thank you, Jane. And Stuart, same question to you, please.
Yeah, thanks, Paula. I think Jane very succinctly put most of the sort of pointers there. It's around, I guess, competency is not about plastering our walls with certificates of qualification. Competency is much more granular, and I guess one of the core parts of competency is around those soft skills. There's been commentary in the last year or two around a lot more mortgage brokers that are coming into the sector. It's very different in as much that more residential mortgages are very commoditized. Still very important to have good quality advice, but it's very much more commoditized. Equity release, nobody buys equity release. No customer wakes up in the morning nudging their partner saying, hey, let's pop down the high street and buy one of those equity release thingies. What equity release, people buy plans, dreams, aspirations, they solve worries. And so to facilitate the right solutions to those right needs, it's about features, which is really about technical training, but it's also about benefits and matching those features to benefits, and explaining benefits is about talking customer language. It's about having empathy. It's about truly understanding their emotions, their worries. I guess we go back to the FCA requirement for fact finds. Fact finds were never regulatory required documents. What the regulator said many, many years ago when this first came about was, you need to evidence that you know your customer. But do we truly know our customer? We don't, and this was highlighted in last year's FCA work about tick boxing, about composite sort of cut and paste templated reports, and not having enough personalization to them. So we've got to be cognizant, as Jane mentioned, around the vulnerability aspects that are more highlighted in this age demographic than maybe the 30 to 40 age group, not exclusively, but more likely. So all of those factors, their own personal worries, their dreams and aspirations for their families, things that maybe not necessarily on a fact find, but it's things that you get to know with engagement, which obviously at the moment is even more vitally important, with so much business now being done electronically over Zoom calls. So it's sometimes a lot harder, well, it is a lot harder to engage those soft fact skills. And then the other element of your question, can it be taught? It can, but it's less of a textbook, death by slides and PowerPoint learning process. It's more about the empathetic skills, the almost role playing, for want of a better word, but it is having that true understanding of how to engage with an age group demographic that certainly more so than ever at the moment has got a lot more worries and concerns that they might otherwise have historically had. So yeah, soft facts, vitally important. And yes, they can be trained depending on the skill sets of the training organisation.
Thank you, Stuart. You've slightly preempted my next question, but I'd like to put it anyway to Sandy. Has understanding client situations and or clients taking on board advice become more difficult without face-to-face meetings over the last 10 months or so? So that's to Sandy, please.
Thank you. I was always a face-to-face advisor with equity release, so a great advocate for that. So obviously, with not being able to do that at the beginning of the first lockdown, we had to look at other ways of being able to engage with our clients. Thankfully, we were lucky with lenders, places like providers like Air as well. They sort of helped us review the processes and to get the best out of our meetings, and to make sure that you know, our clients weren't vulnerable, they were doing everything for the right reasons. Now, my process adapted to doing Zoom meetings or Facebook and you know, that a video meeting. So in theory, I was still managing to see clients. So I think it was just changing the shift of, yes, you can't see them physically, but you can still look at them. You can still look at their expressions, get them to repeat back, and to make sure that any advice that you're giving that they understand. So as you know, it adapted much better than I could have hoped. Somebody had said to me a few years ago that I wouldn't be doing face-to-face advice in 2020. I would have said absolutely no way, because I have to say I enjoy that side of it. But luckily, I think by adapting the process slightly, because we had to, I believe that we're still giving our clients good advice. Maybe the process is taking slightly longer because you're not taking paperwork to them, you're doing everything you know, on Zoom or whatever video system you're using. But at the same time, I still believe that we managed to look out for the clients.
Excellent. And Richard, what's your view on that?
Yeah, I'd agree. Just as with mainstream mortgages, wealth, you know, any form of advice, there are advisors who said that they've adapted really well, and others who have continued to face challenges through not being able to meet face to face. There isn't and shouldn't be a one-size-fits-all approach, but I think we've coped admirably with what we've been able to do. I think what is extremely positive is that there's still a great many good outcomes for customers, and you know, great volumes in the market, and the fact that that's been achieved shows the adaptability and expertise within the industry and all parts of the value chain to be able to deliver to their customers despite what challenges they face.
That's excellent. Thank you very much. Now, moving on. Is the FCA right to be investigating advice practices in the lifetime mortgages market? Are there real problems in your view, or is the regulatory scrutiny simply discouraging new entrants and putting a brake on growth in this market? Can I ask Stuart that question first, please?
Yeah, great question, and very sort of thematic in the current environment. Is the FCA right to investigate? Yes, they are, because let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater here. 99%, and I'd be confident because it's attitude based, of advisors in this sector are passionate. It's one of the reasons I love this sector so much. They're passionate about consumer outcome. Does that mean to say that all the practices are right? No, because you often don't know what you don't know. And I think the FCA's point is that you're only as strong as the weakest link. I'm coming out with all these phrases, these analogies here, but we are only any chain is as strong as the weakest link. There are practices out there through lack of knowledge, lack of experience, lack of training, might well have been exposed by the Dear CEO letters and the work that the FCA have done. They will be back. They're probably in the community now, asking questions, talking to customers, doing mystery shopping. So this isn't going to go away. It's a regulator who clearly is enthused about this sector. So I guess, will regulations scare new members off? No, totally the opposite. I actually think it will draw people in, because it's a robust, good quality sector that cares and delivers good quality outcome. Do we need some tweaks and improvements? Yes, we do, without a shadow of doubt. There is varying standards. We need to be more, as I mentioned earlier, we need to be more reflective around the record keeping. We need to be more holistic, and we need to factor in things. This cannot be a product sold in silos. And I think that's one of the elements that seems to be a core theme with the regulatory work at the moment, that we're too tunnel visioned. We need to broaden that vision out, encompass all relevant products, factor those into a good quality discussion with our customer and guide them to the right solution. So yeah, I actually welcome the work the FCA are doing, and most of the work that our group is doing with members and firms at the moment is around more robust processes, training, development, holistic knowledge. So it's vital that we educate ourselves, and ultimately we do the work for the regulator to be robust, because otherwise they will come in and impose rules upon us, and that generally is a one size fits all, which causes some pain and grief. So there's a lot of momentum, a lot of work the council are doing, UK Finance are doing, and various other organisations and big networks and distribution organisations around the thematic work that the FCA have already flagged, and what they'll probably come back to us with in the very imminent future.
Stuart, thank you. Very comprehensive answer. Just quickly to Richard, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'd agree with Stuart. Regulation is good both for the consumer and the advisor. And what I would like to see, though, with it is greater engagement with advisors, with distributors and trade bodies, to ensure that the findings are a fair reflection of what's actually happening in the market. I think probably the key point for me, and the key takeaway from what the regulator has said, is that around the process, and the fact that the fact find shouldn't be a tick box exercise. They were keen to hear the client's voice in the client fact find and in the suitability reports. And that, though, is not something that should be exclusive to later life market and equity release. It's something that should form a standard part of any advice process, irrespective of the area of the market that you operate in.
Thank you, Richard. Now, do you think advisors have devoted sufficient time and resources to identifying customer vulnerabilities since the pandemic began? Is there anything unusual about this particular time that means that they should have been upping the ante on that? Sandy, what's your take?
I believe so. So when the pandemic struck, as I've said before, we had to change processes, and with the help of the providers, there have been a lot of updated courses on vulnerability, etc. There were Zoom sessions, webinars, you name it, it was all done. Everything adapted very quickly, and there were always a lot of advisors on those meetings, because all we wanted to do, because in this area of advice, our clients are, as you say, we can have vulnerable clients. So we all wanted the best for our clients and to be giving advice, because we couldn't hold fire during the pandemic because some of our clients needed to release funds urgently. So we wanted to make sure that we had updated all our processes. So I believe, I like to believe that that's what we did.
And same question to Jane, please.
Yeah, so Sandy's just given a live example about how, her business has sort of adapted. And within our business, some businesses already use remote advice for equity release and later life, that process. But the face-to-face ones, obviously, their process had to change. Some changed, some remained the same, with slightly different measures put in. But I guess the key thing is advisors are ever resilient, and they found different ways to work in COVID safe, in accordance with the lockdown rules. So, speaking to some of our advisors, they when they were allowed to, they sat in the garden with a conservatory window between the customer. So they've tried to find innovative, different ways to sort of interact as far as they possibly can. And a lot of our lender partners have worked with our advisors with regards to training and guidance and support and how to do this and different ideas. So everybody's really pulled together in this space. Advisors need to be completely confident that vulnerable customers aren't making a snap decision with regards to COVID. That has been my sort of concern. In reaction to a moment in time rather than the bigger picture, or even customers could be encouraged to do so by a family member. It's quite difficult. We talked about the soft skills earlier, so how do you pick up on that as an advisor? Also, could it be that the family member is a vulnerable person? It's, that there's lots of different dynamics that have been sort of accelerated. Stuart talked about aspirations, and all of COVID's really accelerated that and made people think differently. With regard to compliance, it's just as I've stated, really. But as far as the new vulnerability guidance is concerned, one of the key issues for advisors is going to be their ability to evidence and demonstrate the steps to take for vulnerable customers. So we should all work really hard and continue to sort of accelerate that bit.
Lovely, thank you. Now, this one we had to ask, why have advisor firms not embraced RIOs to a greater degree? And what could or should lenders do to improve take-up? I know we could spend all day on this one, but sort of semi-briefly, Sandy, what's your view?
It's an interesting one. It's an interesting question. I am an advisor that has advised in RIOs, and it was more to do with the loan to value for the borrowing. And, there are clients that is the ideal product for them. I think there is a little fear in that working out affordability. So I am a mortgage and equity release advisor, but if you're an equity release advisor solely, I think that's maybe where the fear comes in. So that's where a little bit more training might be worth doing and providing, just to see where these products fit in the market. And it's just understanding the right client and not being afraid of RIOs. I've had people refer RIOs over to me, and I'm sort of saying, but you can actually do this. People are worried about affordability because it's very, very strict criteria, and they have to make sure that if one party dies, that the other party can afford it. But I think that's just responsible lending to me. So yeah, I think I probably say the main thing is maybe a little bit more training, and the product should still be there.
Thank you, Sandy. And Stuart, what's your view?
Yeah, thanks, Paula. I'll keep this brief. Sandy touched on actually there that sort of paradox of responsible lending, which is driven by the PRA rules on lenders, and then you've got the FCA that make commentary around if somebody's borrowing the same amount, not borrowing more, they've serviced a loan regularly at X amount, and they're cutting the rate of interest and then porting it over. Why do we have to go through these huge, deep affordability assessments that many of the RIO providers have gone through? So they're wrestling with that sort of contrary paradox. between those two regulatory entities. And I think, as Sandy said there, we've got to see more lender training or lenders delivering more training. So the RIO lenders have to educate the advisors who are dealing with older customers, the vagaries of the different product sets. What's the difference? A lot of the equity release advisors, let's not forget, have been in the sector for many years and don't know the underwriting requirements of RIO providers. So organisations such as ourselves have a duty of care to members to help support that training and educational need. So I think, yeah, the word probably that sums it up is training and communication. And the final point I'd make is that we're seeing a convergence, going back to earlier conversations and questions around training and qualifications. We're also seeing a convergence where lifetime lenders, we've seen now launch RIO products. One lender has been put in both camps for a number of years. We're seeing others in that innovation sort of direction of travel. And we need to see maybe RIO providers budgeting up with lifetime providers more. So again, let's look at consumer outcome, work it up the funnel and see what we need to deliver good, right consumer outcome.
Lovely. Thank you very much for that. Right, we now come to our final question. I'm going to ask each of you in turn to respond to this one as succinctly as you can, please, mindful of time. So the question is, what one piece of advice would you give an advisor or firm considering getting involved in this market? And I'll put that question first to Stuart, please.
I'll start off really briefly. I think very simply, Paula, the one bit of advice for anybody coming in is listen to all the support that's out there. In this sector, probably more than any other sector, there is massive support, massive training resource, providers, field management, clubs, software providers. The training is there, but you've obviously got to learn, you've got to engage with it. And I think that's the one word of it, the one piece of advice I'd give: embrace the training that's available. Thank
you. And Sandy?
So from the advisor perspective, I think it's the most wonderful area to be advising in. You get to meet the most amazing people. You get to hear stories that you would never have heard if you weren't in the equity release sector. And for me, it's a no-brainer. I absolutely love it. And yeah, it's been life-changing for me, meeting the people that I've met, but also we do change lives with what we do. We help people that, you know, their situation, as Stuart said earlier, they don't wake up and say, today I'm going to buy an equity release. There's a reason behind it, and that's how, you know, by doing the equity release, you are changing lives. So yeah, I love it. So I definitely a great advocate for it.
Thank you, Sandy. Richard, what's your advice?
I think for me, it's about covering all bases: training, technology, consumer engagement, compliance support, engagement with other specialists, whether it be benefits, care, pensions, wealth. The advice needs to be holistic, so your approach has to be as well.
Thank you, Richard. And last word goes to Jane.
Well, just keep it brief. From what the other guys have said already, don't be scared. There's huge growth and opportunity in the sector, so just jump on in.
Brilliant. Thank you so much to all of our panelists for taking part today. I really enjoyed that myself. I hope you all enjoyed it, delegates as well. So thanks to the panelists, and thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.